Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the session about international collaboration. So I'm Chang. I'm the founder and CEO of Ask Health Asia, a Singapore headquartered think tank for health system transformation across the Asia region. But we're also building life science cooperation platform across Asia. So it's great to be able to share the stage with my long-term friend Wei Yang from Singapore and my new friend Ivana from the UK. So I think today the session is actually this is our fourth time collaborating with Beyond in the life science session. So really great to see the growth of impact in the region, and also the participants really have coming from all over the globe, coming to Macau for discussing the innovation and cooperation across the globe on life science space. And today, I think we just really want to dive into the discussion about the international perspectives on life science innovation development, especially from Europe and Singapore's perspective, and also certainly how Greater China can play a role in those international collaborations. And first of all, maybe I will let my two speakers to give a brief introduction about themselves. And I don't know if this is your first Beyond, and so what's your experience so far? Maybe I'll start from the lady, please.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Good. Okay. My name is Ivana Poparic. I lead a small team of life sciences specialists. We're called MedCity, and we are a London cluster for life sciences. We work as a part of a larger local government agency called London and Partners that was set up to help companies from overseas to come to London, to grow in London, and when they're ready, we also help our companies to go to international markets. My focus is working with life sciences and healthcare companies, and what that means is making sure that when they come to our city, they know what the landscape is, who their potential partners are, and if they decide to stay and join our programs, we help them with anything from company formation to finding the partners, finding the people they will employ, and then joining technology-based programs that we are running. And this is my first Beyond, so it's really impressive, I have to say. I've seen a lot of different, very exciting technologies, not just from life sciences, but from other sectors as well. I have to say I've spent the most time looking at the cars, and I'm not a car person, so it's a new thing for me. But it's really well organized, very collaborative, so I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you so much for coming all the way from London to here. And as you introduced, I think once we know you, we'll be able to access to the entire ecosystem in London. So great to have you. And Wei Yang, maybe can you please introduce yourself and your experience here in Beyond?
Yeah, hi, thanks. My name is Wei Yang. I'm actually from Singapore. I'm actually right now at the Singapore Management University, serving as the Vice Provost for Strategic Research Partnerships. And that means looking for research partnerships between government, industry, as well as academia, with the objective of applying all the management sciences, be it from the business model innovations to the regulatory innovations to the even accounting and value innovations, in order for new technologies to be able to find their place in expansion as well as impact within the markets among consumers. Prior to my role in the Singapore Management University, I was actually at the Ministry of Health as the Deputy Secretary for Technology. I was actually brought in at the start of COVID from the National Research Foundation, where I was the Deputy CEO, with the objective of making use of technology in our fight against COVID. So I was overseeing the vaccinations selection, the therapeutic selection, as well as the advance of PCR expansion, PCR testing capacity expansion at first, but eventually the adoption of the antigen rapid test kits as the way to actually detect. And finally, of course, I was responsible for the contact tracing app in Singapore called Trace Together. So those were the things that I did when I was in the Ministry of Health. But while I was there, I was also very interested in the innovation and enterprise ecosystem for medical technologies in Singapore, with that underlying that the data information architecture that allows for many of the very exciting innovations, especially in digital health, to actually find its way into sort of market. So, like I said previously, I was at the National Research Foundation as a Deputy CEO, overseeing the RIE Research Innovation Enterprise Plan in Singapore, which is currently at $25 billion over 5 years, where we actually fund research in all areas, including the universities in A-STAR, our Fraunhofer equivalent, as well as across startups and many others, sort of like research hospitals and so on. So my experience is the first time and beyond, and so it reminds me of the many sort of like innovation sort of festivals that we had in Singapore. We actually tried to hold one together with Techno in Shanghai as well some time back too. So very glad to see this kind of vibrancy. I kind of missed it because 3 years in the ministry fighting COVID, this was the kind of things that I really used to enjoy when I was at the National Research Foundation. But happy to be here to talk about this very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to have you here, finally here in Macau and beyond. And Wei Yang, I think you mentioned, yes, you are like the curator of innovative technology for the health system in Singapore, but also previously as the founder, the biggest founder for R&D research, really building up the innovation ecosystem. So I think my next question would be relevant to that. I think certainly the topic of the day is on international cooperation, especially connecting China to global. But I think before we talk about collaboration, let's learn from your system. So what's sort of because I know both Singapore and London are internationally very renowned innovation center in life science, right? So what's sort of the current major trends? What's the positioning? What's happening there? Maybe starting with Wei Yang, Singapore.
Thanks. Yeah, no, so I think one of the things that we are actually working quite hard on is what we call the digital health innovations. I think as the COVID actually shown us, within what doctors traditionally say was not possible, there was actually a lot of things which are possible. But more importantly, I think one of the things that we realized as well was that there was a certain efficiency and scale at which many medical technologies as well as medical, how should I say, consultations actually could be done using much more digital means. But of course, a large part of it is then trying to revamp the system to actually understand how to make use of this technology in the most effective way. I mean, just to give you an example, I often have people telling me that telemedicine is going to save doctors' time, and I tell them, no, it's not going to save doctors' time because the same amount of time spent on the patient has to be spent on the patient. What it does is that it saves the patient's time. Right. Now, of course, if it saves the patient's time, then what exactly are we creating? We are creating value, not on the health side of the ledger, but in the economy side of the ledger. Second thing, of course, is that with telehealth, there are then possibilities in terms of where the patient is. We face an increasingly aging population in Singapore. So for the aged to travel into the hospital means that the caregiver, usually someone who is productive and working, has to take leave to go and bring that person into hospital, wait, because usually the doctor is not on time. And all this actually costs to society, costs to the economy. So I think a large part of what we actually have to be able to do is to figure out how these kind of technologies are going to save, where it saves, who pays for it as a result. Because if it saves the economy, then actually maybe it's not the Ministry of Health that should be paying, but the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Trade Industry that should welcome some of these things. Which I forgot to mention because my title actually did say that I'm actually still the Senior Advisor for Health Economics at the Ministry of Health. So while I've stepped out to the university to actually do my new role, because my own training is actually a PhD in economics, I've actually held on to this position because health economics is actually one of the most important things that we are working on, which is how do you help new innovations to justify their cost effectiveness. Each innovation on its own might find it very difficult to actually do that job, to be able to tell people that I'm actually going to save you money. It is the system that must learn how to measure this, and the system must then create an economic frame upon which the innovations that actually save you costs as a system get paid appropriately over time, maybe not immediately, but over time, so that actually innovations can continue to be encouraged. So within this space of digital health, one of the things that we are really working on is the underlying data architecture to ensure digital health can see deployment, the data governance and governance over it so that people are comfortable contributing data to it, and of course the use of then AI and other sort of like data science to actually help us to look for some of these trends within the health data to allow us to actually provide for better health. Because one of the things that we are trying to do in Singapore is this concept of what I call the 3 Ps. We are starting with population health, which is actually trying to get people who are not ill to come into the health system for health checks so that we can actually be able to deploy both preventive health and precision health in the longer run. And of course, underlying that is actually all the data collection. Second, of course, one of the things that we are actually working on quite a bit is actually around the cell and gene therapies, which is, I'm actually still the chairman for the Advanced Cell and Gene Therapy Research Institute in Singapore. And a difficulty in this area and similar challenge in the rare diseases area is that the cost of the drugs, the cost of delivery right now is way too expensive. So trying to find a way, a deployment modality that allows for this cost actually to come down is another area that we are working quite a bit on. So this confluence of things like cell and gene therapy, precision medicine, AI, data, and the way to think about preventive health as the way to deliver health, I would say sums up what we're trying to do right now in Singapore.
Great. Thank you, Wei Yang. I was chit-chatting with Ivana. I feel what she mentioned, the priorities really aligned with you just mentioned in Singapore as well. Because for me, based on my experience, there are at least a few things that really align between Singapore system and the UK is the trade-off between cost and effectiveness, right? So really putting value in the center. So I really feel what you have been mentioned must be quite aligned with the UK and London's effort. So I want to hear from you, Ivana.
Yes, absolutely. So our own agencies that are approving the new treatments and new technologies have two priorities. One is effectiveness, and the other one is cost. But actually, cost comes first. And for any company that has an innovative technology, if your solution is slightly better and slightly more effective and saves slightly more time, it's no longer cuts it. You need to show a significant saving, and not to the user, but to the buyer. So you need to make your case very clear on why that technology should be used in what we have in the UK, which is a public healthcare system that is strapped for cash. In terms of the priorities in technology areas, it's a huge overlap, and I think UK and Singapore already have a great collaboration in precision medicine, in digitalization. In terms of where our needs are, it's first, as you already mentioned, finding digital solutions that work at scale to save some money. And that includes things like focusing on moving the care from the hospitals into the community or at home. So before COVID, we already had a lot of interest in remote monitoring and technologies for diagnosis at home, but now they're becoming really necessary because we don't have enough workforce in our healthcare system, and we don't have enough space in hospitals to deal with every patient in that way. Another thing, which is for us, it's UK is only waking up to what China and Singapore and many other countries have already been doing for decades, is looking at prevention of way of treating the population. So we've always waited to the point where you have to spend a lot of money and a lot of effort to treat the patients because we didn't have screening programs in the UK. We've started implementing those not just for cancer, but also for neurodegenerative diseases, for infectious diseases. So any digital technology that helps with screening the population is incredibly necessary and very attractive to our clinical community. And I would say anything to do with it's not so exciting in clinical terms, but all of the system solutions that help manage the workforce, theater time, prescribing, and can be done at scale and implemented easily into the IT system are very important. The issue we have in the UK with those is if you look at the IT solutions, our hospital groups are independent. So you're going to have to work with every buyer separately to implement your technology. So a lot of tech companies are not aware of this when they start working in the UK. So I would emphasize that as something to plan for.
I just want to echo that. So in Singapore, we actually had we had 2 clusters, then became 6 clusters. And then when 6 clusters happened, we started having a lot of IT systems. We then reduced it back to 3 clusters. But the good thing is that now both clusters, there are 2 clusters right now already using the Epic hospital management system. And the third one will probably come on board soon as well. So very soon in Singapore, we have one single hospital system. And of course, the good thing about that is that this particular company owns about 40% of the market share, around the world. So I think, and of course, almost all the major hospices in the US actually now use them as well. So anything that you innovate with the Epic system, actually probably the US can use. And so I guess in Singapore we've managed to solve, but yes, it was a huge problem in the past. And even now there's still a lot of legacy systems we are trying to consolidate, because each doctor will say that my method is better and then it's the only correct one. And so every hospital always has their own IT system. So that was one huge issue for us as well previously.
Thank you both for, I think we can have this conversation forever and ever because there's so many similar, not only aspirations, but also challenges in many health systems. So let's focus on the collaboration and the international exchanges, especially from China, right? Because I think, as we all know, China has become one of the really global pioneers in both digital health and life science space, and certainly China market has been also one of the most rapidly growing major markets. So I think both inbound and outbound sort of sentiment has been really, really strong. And in the last 4 years, I think go global became a really buzzword in China, especially to Europe and to Southeast Asia. So there are even the digital health community, the health tech, life science, but also even the traditional pharma and device leaders, they are also looking at global expansion. So I want to ask, based on your own experience, what will be sort of the positioning for your city, Singapore and UK, to help the Chinese leaders in their globalization journey, and any sort of tips you want to offer to them? Maybe Ivana, do you want to go first?
Okay. So, I mean, there has been so much collaboration between UK and China already. What we see in London in particular is we have a very large community of primarily Chinese students. And students come in, they study, and then they decide they're going to start their own business. Some of them stay in London, some of them move back to China, some of them go to the third countries. But what we've noticed, and we are an organization that works a lot with universities and on behalf of London universities, is where the politicians and where the economic sectors are deciding to do this and that and changing their mind, in the background, the academics are just doing their own thing. And they very often just let know their system what is happening after it already happened. So I've just learned while I was in Shenzhen the other day that there is another informal community of data scientists that started from China. They are all Mandarin speakers, but is now a global collaboration for AI in medical sciences. And we see groups like that popping out all the time. And I think while it takes a very long time to do a collaboration on government-to-government level, or even between the companies, individuals are really making sure that we continue working together and we do more. London as a whole is extremely diverse, very global city. It's impossible to do life sciences and healthcare without internationals. London universities are 40% European and another 30% rest of the world. So there's actually very few people who were born in London and working within our scientific community. And then there is constant influx of internationals and also people moving to the other countries to develop their technologies. I was just complaining before we've started this panel that a lot of my friends have moved to Singapore in the last 10 years. So I have to now go regularly and visit Singapore.
Yeah, no, and I think in all these global collaborations and so on, we have to be, like I said, the underlying people are very, very important. One of the things that I've found in university as well, if any research program you try to do fails if there are two sides that are not friends with each other to begin with. So often it is about finding people with friends and of course in institutions you want to work with in areas of mutual interest, and then actually use them to be the bridge that builds up some of these programs. And I think in many of these global programs as well, global collaborations in healthcare, we need to think in these ways, which is that who are the underlying people who will make sure that these collaborations actually will be strong and grow stronger. What is the basis of their maybe ongoing interaction as communities, as people? And of course, after that, then all the institutional support to actually make sure that those things actually can have the resources to make it work. Because even the best of friends, if the resourcing is not good, after a while we'll get tired about trying to build on these collaborations. Secondly, of course, is to actually have clarity on what is the basis of that collaboration, of that sort of like work. So is it typically it is that both sides have something that they lack, that the other side is stronger in, and of course, and a certain desire to say that actually collectively we are able to have greater impact. So, for example, when Singapore looks at the opportunities in China, what Singapore does have is a very strong healthcare system, internationally renowned, with many doctors trained internationally, many of them in the UK. That's why we then have a lot of collaborations already with the UK doctors to begin with. But at the same time, we have an Asian population, right, which actually means that if we want to be doing collaborations with people, we must be looking at perhaps disease that are perhaps more indicated in the Asian populations, and that's where we try to focus on. But then on top of that, then we're saying, okay, but our population in Singapore is small. So where do we find the clinical cohorts for these trials to take place? So we look to China, we look to India, we look to the Southeast Asian countries, because the genetic makeup of Singapore is Oriental Chinese, as well as Malay, which is then representative of all the what I call the seafaring people of Asia, that goes all the way from South India to the South Pacific Islands, all the way up to Japan and Taiwan. They are all actually sharing similar genetic roots. And of course, finally, we do have a good proportion of the North Indians as well in Singapore, which are then representative of the Central Asian, North Indian populations. And of course, with this population in Singapore, actually there's a good coverage genetically of almost all of the Asia-Pacific region. So what we have to focus on is then perhaps in terms of disease that actually affect these people, and maybe some cross-comparison studies of how maybe different disease indications and different disease targets work better or not, for different groups of people. That's the basis of where we then try to do our science. Now, of course, then when we look at then clinical trials, then we say, okay, how do we maybe for the drugs that target better the Polynesian type people, I have some collaborators in the Southeast Asia region because that's where I can get greater volumes. If I have those that target the Oriental Chinese population better, I'll have collaborations with hospitals in China. Then I can expand the recruitment faster. But then collaboratively, we can then find each other, helping each other in terms of what we can do. And of course, what Singapore then has is a certain ability to help to get the regulatory clearance. And of course, once regulatory clearance is done in Singapore, there is the, how should I say, the affordance that others will then look at it favorably, because after all, the Health Science Authority, which is like the FDA equivalent in Singapore, is the only regulatory authority right now accredited at level 4 by WHO, which is the highest level. So whatever HSA says is usually believed. I mean, of course, every jurisdiction will still do their own process, but certainly whatever that has been approved in Singapore will be seen favorably by almost every regulatory authority across the world. So I guess really trying to understand what each one offers and brings to the table, I think is key. Yeah.
Thank you both for highlighting sort of the international integration and collaboration in the innovator community side, but also the tips that you offered when people are pursuing more international collaboration in those places. How about let's taking the perspective of an industry leader in China, right? When they're go global journey and they want to land in Singapore, maybe for Southeast Asia, and maybe very interested in the UK or Europe, what are some key successful factors, or what's any good case studies that you can share? Maybe Wei Yang, you first.
No, I think that there are having some clarity on what's your strategy and what's your pathway to market, I think will be very, very important. And of course, the nature of what you need to do is also that you need to understand what the markets that you're thinking about think is necessary in terms of the nature of your product. So it's quite difficult to be very definitive, but certainly I think from our perspective, Singapore is certainly a base for which you can reach the Southeast Asia population. And of course, and when I talk about reaching the Southeast Asia population, in healthcare, I think it's useful to remember and understand that it's a provision of a service to individuals. The good thing about individuals is that individuals can move around. Okay, so actually there's a large part of what I would say the more upper middle class populations in the Southeast Asia region that actually comes to Singapore for medical treatment. Right? So while the Singapore population itself is not big, the catchment of the medical population that you can serve already out of Singapore itself is actually quite large. So then if you are looking for a way to reach out to that population, then certainly Singapore becomes the right place to go into. Now, of course, the other thing, of course, is if you want to go to another jurisdiction, you have to ask, what's the competition like? So if your particular product already has another competing company who is already in the clinical trial phase as well and so on, then you have to ask, will you find it difficult to then enter such a jurisdiction for your own clinical trials? Because what do you bring extra to the table? How do you actually contribute to whatever medical provision there is? Whereas if you actually enter a place where maybe no such products available, then you might actually find greater acceptance and faster regulatory sort of like, or at least a removal of regulatory hurdles for you, because they know that it is a need for them and they can't actually otherwise serve their own populations. The third thing, of course, is to think about actually what is the shape of your investors. What are your investors asking and looking for? Because often I find companies may try to pursue a particular strategy, but if there are disagreement in investors, there's a complete recipe for disaster. So ensuring that the horizons of the investors, as well as the plan that you're actually pursuing, is actually in line with each other, I think will be very important as well. And finally, of course, trying to understand also I think right now, some understanding of the geopolitical winds in some sense, I think will be important. And of course, trying to then figure out actually where will you find the most support in terms of the local ecosystem, but also in terms of that particular local ecosystem's ability to reach out into the markets, I think will be important. So for Singapore's case, of course, yeah, we do have a certain reputation among Southeast Asian countries. So while we cannot influence what our neighboring countries will or will not do, but certainly I think something that Singapore adopts usually is then adopted quite readily in the region. But at the same time, we also know that whatever technologies we develop in Singapore is typically accepted both in China, US, and Europe, with very little impediments to entry into those markets. So I think, again, that could be a reason why Singapore might be a useful place to be. But of course, if you already have collaborators in the UK, I would say that maybe going there might actually be a good thing to do, because obviously UK may be even more, in a way, accepted by the US in terms of as a major market. And of course, with Brexit, maybe it's not as much of access to Europe, but I say it would still be a case, because just as a lot of people in the region come to Singapore for medical care, a lot of people in Europe go to the UK as well for the medical care. So that's another reason why you might want to choose that particular country as your next bridge.
Thank you, Wei Yang, for not only promoting Singapore but also the UK. So Ivana, you mentioned also you have like not only partnership with the Chinese industry leaders themselves, but also with the ecosystem partner like AstraZeneca China, right? So can you elaborate a bit more on those kind of partnerships?
I mean, there are a lot of partnerships with Chinese industry and academic organizations in London. There are a number of joint medical schools that are actually London universities that are now in different cities in China. I think I'm an alumni of King's College London. We have a medical school in Hong Kong for the last 40 years, and we're very proud of that. But that's also one of the main reasons why Chinese companies come to the UK. First is our university sector and the level of innovation that comes out of those universities. And then the second, which is very closely related, is we have a huge number of very high quality graduates coming out of our life sciences schools, our medical schools, and also our tech degrees every year. And what is slightly different between Chinese graduates and UK graduates is in the UK, kids nowadays want to either set up their own startup or they want to work for a startup. So it's a very nice place to recruit if you are a company that has a new exciting technology. If you are working on something that doesn't already exist, everyone wants to put a first-in-class type of product on the market. And the majority of not just Chinese businesses and Singaporean businesses, but international businesses that set up in London tell us it's because they can recruit very niche specialists across any technology area and across any medical specialty. So that's kind of a main thing. I think in terms of the collaboration with China, UK and London in particular are very good in early stage innovation. We, as a city, spin out 100 companies every year. they'll come from universities, and that doesn't count for startups that people set up on their own. Where we kind of lack and would very much appreciate the capabilities of China is scaling up, going into the large market, but also the manufacturing capability that China has. And for us, that's an issue that we're trying to resolve while learning from China and while learning actually also from Singapore.
No, and I want to just emphasize, I think when you talk about global collaborations, I think the term global actually then implies it's not about bilateral, it's global, right? And she's really trying to find the affordance, the advantage of each of these different sort of like areas, and maybe to have a plan that's not just one location, but multiple locations, each leveraging on each other's advantages. Right? Certainly China has the advantage potentially of a large population and a manufacturing base that allows you to then scale at the lower cost. But of course, low cost may not always be the most important thing initially. So the question is actually then where would you then maybe start one phase of operation, next phase, what do you do, the third phase, what do you do? I think that to me is a very important sort of like consideration when you think about global collaborations. I mean, just for example, London has Equis, who actually is a great exchange for the startups to actually raise small caps of like investments in the public market, so to speak. Singapore is trying to do that, but we've never really gotten the ball rolling as much. So I may even say that if you have reason to be both in Singapore and London, actually maybe do both, but you leverage on what London can afford for some areas, what Singapore can do for others, and actually you grow in that. The other thing I would also say, we recommend both Singapore and London is that I think the international language of medication and healthcare is still in English, right? And of course, the good thing about coming to both our locations is that if we recruit, including both the Chinese students who have gone to study in these jurisdictions, actually you can be guaranteed that they will be bilingual. And the bilingual sort of like community will be very important in any collaboration efforts between China and other places, because ultimately, if you go in speaking only primarily Mandarin, you have difficulty trying to convince people that they want to work with you. But if you've got a crew that can speak English and speak the language of the other side, I think you'll find those collaborations a lot more fruitful and probably moved at a much faster pace, simply because the ability to understand each other is much better.
Great. I think you both really highlight the true global perspective of the internal, like the people composition globally, the whole value chain of your product R&D to development, also the market access sort of planning. So really, I think for a Chinese leader, they're now upgrading to a true global company. I think those are going to be very key considerations to take. One last question, I think for each of you, give maybe 1 minute to have some initial impression or comments on GBA, because we are here now in Macau, in Greater Bay Area, in China. So I think it's really one of the most sort of open area for international cooperation, but also sort of the industry, sort of very concentrated sort of industry development area. So what kind of role you feel Macau or GBA can play for as the journey of Chinese industry globalization? Maybe starting with Wei Yang.
No, so I think the key thing is that you need to understand where your strengths are. So one of the things that, one of the strengths, I guess, you have the actually some very good hospitals in the Guangzhou, as well as I think primarily in Guangzhou, Zhongshan Yuyuan, the Guangzhou hospitals and so on, are actually all very good hospitals, well regarded in China, but also internationally. So make use of that. Second thing is it's been highlighted to me by Jason, who actually leads the whole Beyond effort, Jason Ho, right? So is that actually the Hengqin area has a special dispensation that allows anything that's actually tried in the Hengqin area to immediately enter into 30 hospitals in the Guangzhou Greater Bay Area as well. So that's potentially a basis for trialing something in maybe a regulatory sandbox here, but with the purpose of using the 30 hospitals in Guangzhou to then enter the Chinese market. And after that phase, being able to then scale across China. So understanding where those leverage points are, I think will be a key part of ensuring that the GBA itself has its value proposition to the rest of the world of why people want to come to collaborate with you first, as part of their way to enter China. And of course, then for the rest of the Chinese companies to come to you, to then maybe go out to the rest of the world through some of these affordances as well.
Great. Well, maybe just one clarification. For the program you mentioned must be the Hong Kong Macau Medical and Device Connect program. So that's actually the product launched in Macau and Hong Kong. They can access to those hospitals in the
So
cities.
that's why there's something sort of like only, it's not everywhere.
Yes, yes. So Ivana, please.
This has been my first visit when I actually went to mainland China as well. So I think one big thing that I learned and took as a really huge value proposition is the amount and the quality of the research infrastructure. And I think both London and Singapore are very limited because we have very limited space. So I think this is a very exciting opportunity, especially for early stage companies that don't have enough money to go and set up in Singapore and London and have the facilities where they can do a lot of exciting science while someone else is taking care of all of the services they need on site. So I think that for me was one of the things that we really can learn from and we really are envious of coming from London.
I think the complementary sort of features that really where can start building more deeper collaboration. So I know both of you, this is your first Beyond, so I really hope you can come back here more often and bring your ecosystem to be connected here with the GBA area as well in the future. With that, thank you so much. Thank you.